Reacher actor Alan Ritchson has reacted to Christian criticism of him glorifying fornication through his characters. He specifically does this through both Reacher Season 1 and Reacher Season 2. Obviously, he plays Jack Reacher, the main character in that show, and he is depicted engaging in fornication in both Season 1 and Season 2. Given he's the main hero, he's the person that the creators want you to associate with. They want you to kind of mimic. They want you to idealize. It is very clear that they are trying to promote this as a good thing. He doesn't really face any negative consequences for these actions. It is not shown as something that is evil. Rather, that it is shown as something that is good and desired and that you should be engaging in. That is what he is doing in this show. He's promoting this grave evil. And he has responded to this criticism. He responded to it in an interview with GQ. And he says, people have this weird relationship with fictional characters and sort of equate that to the real human being. I don't have that problem making that distinction. I get criticized a lot by Christians who are like, how dare you have an unmarried sex scene on TV and then talk about Jesus? I'm sorry, I doubt that's going to be part of the conversation when I'm standing at the pearly gates. So he just completely dismisses this. What he's doing is the sin of scandal. And obviously he's showing his pride here too by claiming that he knows what God is going to say to him when it is time for his personal judgment. This is really, really bad stuff right here. But this is unsurprising stuff. He has kind of blasted Christians in the past who have criticized him. He has this really, really lengthy post or a video that he did on Instagram when he was being criticized for playing Reacher, kind of engaging in, I guess, things that certain people don't like to see. And obviously he was taking issue with Christians criticizing him. But he also did this interview. If you want to read all of that, you can. I did all the transcription there. But he also did this interview with the Hollywood Reporter last year where he says, I'm a Christian quite simply because of what Jesus calls us to do, love other people until death. It doesn't mean we're all to be hung on a cross, but how can I suffer for you? That is a beautiful thing. He then went on to decry his fellow Christians, saying Christians today have become the most vitriolic tribe. It is so antithetical to what Jesus was calling us to be and to do. Ironically, he would then go on to lampoon President Donald Trump and accuse him of being a rapist, while he's saying that you should be able to you should suffer for other people. And then he's accusing Christians of being vitriolic, right? I mean, you just can't make it up. Very, very hypocritical stuff. But let's get into kind of what he said to GQ. His claim that Christ will not confront him for glorifying sin, that's patently false. This is what the Catechism of the Catholic Church teaches. Each man receives his eternal retribution in his immortal soul at the very moment of his death, in a particular judgment that refers his life to Christ, either entrance into the blessedness of heaven through a purification or immediate and everlasting damnation. So God is going to judge you on your life, especially the sins that you have not confessed through the sacrament of penance, confession, or reconciliation, whichever you want to call it. And there's lots of depictions of what happens during the final judgment. So there's two judgments. There's the personal judgment, and then there's a final judgment. And then furthermore, creatives, such as Richardson here, have a responsibility to promote what is good and true. St. Pope John Paul II explained this in his message for the 38th World Communications Day in 2004. He says, this year's theme is also a reminder to everyone, both communicators and those whom they address, that all communication has a moral dimension. As the Lord himself has said, it is from the abundance of the heart that the mouth speaks. People grow or diminish in moral stature by the words which they speak and the messages which they choose to hear. These same media also have the capacity to do grave harm to families by presenting an inadequate or even deformed outlook on life, on the family, on religion, and on morality. I think that it's very clear that's what happens in Reacher with them glorifying the fornication. This power either to reinforce or override traditional values like religion, culture, and family was clearly seen by the Second Vatican Council, which taught that if the media are to be correctly employed, it is essential that all who use them know the principles of the moral order and apply them faithfully. Communication in any form must always be inspired by the ethical criterion of respect for the truth and for the dignity of the human person. St. Pope John Paul specifically warned about the glorification of fornication and how it is detrimental to the common good. He said this: infidelity, sexual activity outside of marriage, and the absence of a moral and spiritual vision of the marriage covenant are depicted uncritically, while positive support is at times given to divorce, contraception, abortion, and homosexuality. Such portrayals, by promoting causes inimical to marriage and the family, are detrimental to the common good of society. So very clear what he is saying there. Now, obviously, there is some criticism here that I've seen in the comments. This guy right here, Proto, is saying, what does he say here? He says, puritanical approach to culture has killed the ability of the church to reach others and makes their attempts at storytelling come off as insincere, uncreative, and propagandistic in execution. So that's actually not what the church teaches. That's not what I'm saying, because you can go over here, you can look at what Pope Paul VI wrote back in 1963 in this document called Inter Mirifica. He's talking about storytelling, movies, TV, etc. And he clearly says right here, finally, the narration, description, or portrayal of moral evil, even though the media of social communication can indeed serve to bring about a deeper knowledge and study of humanity, and with the aid of appropriately heightened dramatic effects, can reveal and glorify the grand dimensions of truth and goodness. Nevertheless, such presentations ought always to be subject to moral restraint, lest they work to the harm rather than the benefit of souls, particularly when there is question of treating matters which deserve reverent handling, or which, given the baneful effect of original sin in men, could quite readily arouse base desires in them. So obviously you can depict someone engaging in the sin of fornication, but it must be shown in a negative light so that you glorify the grand dimensions of truth and goodness, showing this as something that is wrong. You can show someone engaging in it, realizing that it is wrong, having negative consequences from it, maybe even having repentance and moving on from there. And that is actually a good thing. That would be a good depiction of that, showing how wrong and evil it is, someone overcoming it and getting past it and moving forward. Like that is, there's nothing wrong with depicting things that are bad in movies as long as you are clearly showing them as bad. The issue that we have today, I've talked about this, Brian Niemeyer has talked about this, I've cited him numerous times. He is a novelist. Talk about that you have to depict heroes engaging in the morals that you want people to engage in. And what we have now in Hollywood is they are having these characters, having these stories, engaging in these disordered, evil immorals. Homosexuality is constantly promoted as something that is good. Fornication, constantly promoted as something that is good. And it is not. It should not be shown that way. It should be shown as the opposite. Those things should be depicted as bad. We should be seeing heroes doing what is good and just and right. That is what we want to see. And I think, obviously, a lot of people intrinsically want that. I think that's why you see the superhero genre took off, because people want to see people doing what is good, just, and right. And the issue that I think a lot of these superheroes have gotten into is that they started using that as a vehicle to push all of the other evil agendas that they have. So they took these people that do the good, just, and right things, and they've tried to warp it and twist it. They've added the homosexuality. They've inserted a false empathy where now you're sympathetic to the actual villains, etc. All kinds of problems with that. And it is a twisting, it is a warping, it is a disordered interpretation of what is true, just, and right. And this idea that you can't have amazing, excellent, great works of art, movies, television, etc., if you stick to these simple guidelines, principles, is just false. It's just absolutely false. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, perfect examples of that. Timeless stories that point us towards what is good and true. We actually have a really, really good article over here that Brian Niemeyer penned on Return of the Jedi, discussing an original review of it, talking about how Return of the Jedi, how Star Wars, the original trilogy in general, points us towards heaven, towards Jesus Christ, towards God. And then it also depicts evil, vile things like Jabba the Hutt. It depicts Jabba the Hutt as this evil, atrocious individual. Like, Here is an example of how this Orthodox archbishop described Jabba the Hutt, saying, Jabba himself, a veritable symbol of gluttony, is a page from the ladder of divine ascent. St. John of the Ladder described him well and accurately predicted his ultimate condition. This gross degenerate enslaves shapely women and forces them to dance nearly nude on the end of a chain. Then instead of taking sexual advantage of them, he fulfills his passions by casting them through a glass top trapdoor and watching in lascivious delight while the monstrous beast devours them in a most agonizing manner. The close relationship between gluttony and inner depravity is clearly portrayed. The link between unbridled passions and hideous sadism, sexual passions, and death and torture are dramatically set forth. Jabba the Hutt is the very personification of the passions of the fallen nature. He and his minions are practically a summary of the teachings of the Desert Fathers, and particularly of St. John of the Ladder on the subject. At last, Raithal, the troublesome step 5 of the ladder of divine ascent, seems supremely reasonable. Jabba and his domain of depraved passions is finally destroyed by Luke Skywalker. Brother Luke ascends another stage toward true monasticism, toward becoming a true Jedi, receiving the spiritual schema. So clearly, you can show evil. You have Jabba the Hutt, who is this glutton, this lustful glutton, and he's terrible, and he's doing absolutely evil things, but he is destroyed by the hero. And that is what we want. We want to see our heroes overcome these evils, whether they're the personification of them, whether they're an inner evil that they're fighting internally. But that is what we want to see. We want to see heroes fighting back against this evil. We see this in The Lord of the Rings with Frodo and the ring. We see this with Boromir and his temptation over the ring. He tries to go and hunt down and kill Frodo. He eventually realizes what he's done. He seeks penance and forgiveness from Aragorn for it. I mean, these are great things. So you can depict evil in movies, in television shows, and still have great stuff. So this idea that sticking to these principles, being true to this, somehow ruins the art is just simply false. We have so many examples that prove that to be true. And in fact, some of our greatest movies and televisions are the ones that do stick to these principles. It's as Tolkien says, the pinnacle of a fairy story is the eucatastrophe, which is giving you that gleam of evangelium. And you get that in both Star Wars and Lord of the Rings as examples. But what Alan Ritchson is saying here is just absolutely wrong. It's disgusting. It's repulsive. And I pray that he truly does repent and he realizes what he is doing is wrong, that he's leading a lot of people down the wrong path, and maybe he should rethink what he is doing. Instead, we should follow the example of Neil McDonough, who has famously said he would not kiss a woman on set other than his wife, and he is not interested in kind of portraying things like that. But that doesn't mean he isn't opposed to playing evil characters. He played the devil in a recent movie, but the whole point of that movie is kind of showing the story of Job, having him being overcome this great evil. So there's nothing wrong with depicting evil, but it has to be shown in a way where it is shown as evil rather than shown as good, which is one of the big problems we've seen today in media across all types of media, whether it be video games, movies, television shows, comic books, novels, tabletop gaming, etc. That is the biggest problem we have with our pop culture today. But let me know what you guys make of this. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, especially to each other, and to always, always speak the truth.